Every 4 years, it happens. The biggest names from England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales come together, not as rivals, but as teammates, for one of the most legendary tours in rugby. And in 2025, they're heading back to Australia. Let's take a look at which surprise names made the cut, which big stars missed out, and if Andy Farrell can lead the Lions to a rare series win. Here's everything you need to know about the 2025 British and Irish Lions Tour. The British and Irish Lions Tour happens every 4 years, 2 years after the previous Men's World Cup. The team is selected from the best players from Scotland, England, Ireland and Wales, and tours one of Australia, South Africa and New Zealand, where they play local sides or invitational sides, and it culminates in a 3-match test series with the host nation's national team. In 2025, the Lions are touring Australia. The head coach for this tour is Ireland's Andy Farrell, who named the rest of his backroom staff on the 26th of March, who are John Dalziel, Simon Easterby, John Fogarty, Andy Goodman, and Richard Wigglesworth. Just over a month later, on the 8th of May, an event was hosted where the squad was named. England captain Mauro Toji was named as the Lions captain for the 2025 tour to lead the remaining 37 men joining him in the playing squad. There were 15 from Ireland, 13 from England, 8 from Scotland and 2 from Wales, selected by Farrell and his backroom staff in the initial squad. With squad selection, they initially came up with around 80 players who they thought were good enough to go on the tour, which meant more than 40 missed out on the original squad. If injuries happen before the tour starts or during the tour, some of these other players will get called up as replacements. But this doesn't mean there aren't controversial selections. For the most part, the 2025 tour hasn't been that controversial. I think most people think the selections are fair, and even the distributions of nationalities is too, despite Wales only having 2 players. But a couple of players do come to mind as being controversially missed out, and none more so than Scotland winger Darcy Graham, who scored 39 tries in his last 50 games for club and country, not being selected on the wing, with Tommy Freeman, James Lowe, Duhan van der Merwe and Matt Hansen all being selected ahead of him. Many have been surprised at Hansen's selection over Graham. But Hansen is an Ireland international and is used more like another creator on the pitch by Farrell, which is a fairly unique usage of a winger, which Graham might not be able to do. So I personally understand the selection. However, Graham decided to go on and score a hat-trick for his club in the following game to perhaps send a message to Andy Farrell they should be going. But there's plenty of other players who could feel like they should have gone, like Ben Curry, Robbie Henshaw and Jamie Ritchie, to name a few. If any injuries happen, one of these guys is likely to get called up. There's also a couple of players coming home, with Sione Tuipulotu and Matt Hansen being Australian-born players and coming through the Australian system before moving to both Scotland and Ireland respectively to play for the nations they qualify for through ancestry. And Finlay Bealham, who was recently called up to replace Xander Fagerson, who is unfortunately unavailable for the tour due to injury, also falls under this category. Jack Dempsey could be another player like this, who could potentially get called up at some point depending on his injury status, and has actually been capped 14 times by the Wallabies. There was part of me who wanted Farrell to call up as many of the Australian-born players available to him as he could, just for some good old-fashioned shithousery. The first game, funnily enough, isn't in Australia. It's actually taking place in Dublin against Argentina on the 20th of June. But it might be a bit of a makeshift team, as Andy Farrell has said he isn't going to pick anyone who's just played in their league finals. So anyone available from Leinster, Leicester or Bath isn't going to be playing in that game, along with Scotland fullback Blair Kinghorn, who won't be available due to the top 14 finishing later in the calendar. We've actually already seen Jamie George and Asher Pokuforjor be called up to the training squad, who will likely be involved in this game. After the game against Argentina, the squad will fly out to Australia to start the tour proper. Their first game in Australia will be against Western Force in Perth, before heading to Brisbane to play the Queensland Reds, then Sydney to play the Waratahs, and Canberra to play the Brumbies, all in 11 days. The next game will be against the first of the invitational sides, which comprises of players from Australia and New Zealand, to be played in Adelaide before the first test kicks off at Lang Park in Brisbane on the 19th of July. There's one more game that isn't a test match to be played midweek between the first and second tests, which is a First Nations and Pacific 15. This game was added to replace the match that would have been played against the now defunct Melbourne Rebels. After that, the last 2 tests with Australia are the only games remaining, with the champions to be decided at the end. You should expect a lot of experimentation in the early games for the Lions, so that Farrell and his coaching staff can get a good view of the combinations that could work for the tests. In fact, it's not uncommon for the Lions to lose 1 or 2 of these matches before the tests kick off due to this. But you should see this slowing down as we get closer to the test matches, when Farrell has a better idea of what his team will look like. In the professional era, the Lions have only ever won 2 test series, one in 1997 against South Africa, and the other in 2013, the last time time they toured Australia. They also drew the series against New Zealand in 2017. They lost to South Africa in 2021. Over the last few years, Australia have not been at their old heights for the double World Cup winning side. They had a disastrous 2023, not winning a game in the Rugby Championship and being knocked out at the group stages of the 2023 World Cup, ultimately costing head coach Eddie Jones his job. He was replaced by ex-Ireland head coach Joe Schmidt, who took charge before the 2024 Rugby Championship, and who Andy Farrell was the assistant of until he took charge of Ireland in 2019. Australia only won one game out of the 6 Rugby Championship games that season, which was a narrow 20-19 victory over Argentina for being trounced by the same opposition 67-27 in the next round. But the improvements would start to show in their November tour of the UK and Ireland, where they would beat both England and Wales before being comfortably dispatched by Scotland, and putting up a good fight in Dublin, but ultimately being unable to come away the victors. But before that point, people were talking about the Lions tour being a formality, and some even suggesting they should tour Argentina instead. But the performances in the November have, for the most part, quieted those voices, and have brought back a bit more of the gravitas to this tour. After all, the Lions only have a few weeks to build cohesion and get used to Farrell's tactics. Australia would have been doing that for over a year at this point. Most people, however, still expect the Lions to win the tour, but the November results and performances, along with the Lions series record over the last 30 years, have brought about a few question marks around that now. Can Australia do the impossible? If you liked that, you'll also like this video here. Thanks for watching.